She sat alone at the wedding until a stranger whispered, "Pretend you're my bride." Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The soft hum of a string quartet filled the grand ballroom of the Belridge Hotel. Crystal chandeliers glimmered overhead, scattering light across faces painted with wealth and confidence. Everyone here seemed to belong, everyone except her. Elena Carter sat alone at the corner table, the only one without a partner. Her pale blue dress, borrowed from her neighbor, was one size too large. Her shoes pinched, and the frosting stains on her wrist were the quiet evidence that she was not a guest, she was part of the catering team. She had just finished delivering the last wedding cake of the season. Her small bakery, Sweet Haven, was hanging by a thread, and this one order was supposed to pay the rent. But when the groom's assistant had yelled that she had ruined the symmetry of the cake with a misplaced flower, Elena had been dismissed without payment. Now, exhausted, she sat at the edge of the celebration she could never afford, watching couples laugh under the soft gold lights. She tried to disappear into the background, but whispers started around her. "Who invited her?" someone murmured. "Probably crashed the party for free food," another said. Elena lowered her gaze, clutching her purse. The music swelled, and her heart pounded with the rhythm of humiliation. She wanted to vanish. That was when a shadow fell over her shoulder. "Do not move," a deep voice said quietly. She turned. Standing beside her was a tall man in a perfectly tailored black suit. His dark eyes held a kind of command that froze her in place. He leaned down, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "Pretend you are my bride," he whispered. Before Elena could respond, the band stopped playing. Every head in the room turned. The spotlight landed on them. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. The man straightened, wrapping his arm around her shoulders, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. His tone shifted from private to public, smooth, confident, undeniable. "There you are," he said, loud enough for the guests to hear. "I was afraid you had left me again." And the crowd did tellable. Gasps, laughter, applause. Someone shouted, "Congratulations?" Elena blinked in disbelief. Her lips parted, but no sound came. His grip was gentle but firm, guiding her to stand. He smiled for the crowd, but beneath that perfect smile she caught a flicker of tension, like a secret he was trying to hide. When the noise finally dimmed, he leaned closer once more. "I am sorry," he murmured. "You just saved me from something very complicated. I will explain soon." Her pulse thundered. She looked around at the hundreds of strangers, at the phones recording them, at the woman in a glittering gown near the stage staring in shock. "What did you just get me into?" Elena whispered. The man's jaw tightened, but his eyes softened. "Something I should have handled better." He released her gently, offering a polite nod before walking away through the sea of stunned guests. She stood frozen, her heartbeat echoing in her ears, the applause still ringing as if mocking her. Outside the ballroom doors, she heard a waiter whisper, "That is Alexander Reid, the hotel's CEO himself." Elena turned toward the mirror by the entrance. Her reflection looked back at her, trembling and small, holding a borrowed purse and wearing a stranger's story. And for the first time in her life, she felt the sharp pull of destiny, an impossible beginning, disguised as a mistake. The next morning, Elena woke up on the couch of her small apartment above the bakery. Her phone buzzed non-stop with notifications, news alerts, messages, and even comments from strangers. Her name was trending on social media. Mystery bride at the Belridge wedding. Her stomach twisted. She replayed the night in her mind. The flash of cameras, the stranger's whisper, the warmth of his hand on her shoulder. It had felt like a dream, but the internet had turned it into a headline. When she walked downstairs to open the shop, the bell above the door jingled. Standing there was the same man from the wedding, Alexander Reid. In daylight, he looked even more intimidating. His black suit was pressed to perfection, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Reid," she stammered. "Why are you here?" He removed his sunglasses and looked directly at her. "To apologize, and to make you an offer." Elena blinked, still half in shock. "An offer?" Alexander nodded. Last night the press caught us together. They think you are my fiancé. If I deny it, the board will assume I have lost control again. I need you to keep up the act for 1 month. Elena laughed nervously, certain she had misheard. You want me to pretend to be your fiancé? Yes, he said calmly. In return, I will pay off your debts and fund your bakery for a full year. Her chest tightened. It sounded insane, like something out of a movie. Why would someone like you need someone like me? Because you are believable, Alexander said, his tone softening. You are real, and right now the company needs something real. She crossed her arms, trying to protect herself from the storm of confusion inside. This is ridiculous. He set a folder on the counter. Inside was a legal contract, signed and sealed. She scanned the first page. Clause 1. No romantic involvement. Clause 2. Public appearances at company events required. Clause 3. Confidentiality must be absolute. Clause 4. Agreement ends after 30 days. Elena exhaled sharply. This is a business deal. Their feet are one of the man. That is all it is, Alexander replied, though something in his eyes flickered tired, maybe even lonely. Think of it as a partnership. Her hands trembled. The bakery's bills sat unopened in a stack beside the register. Her brother's medical notice peeked out from beneath them. Alexander watched her in silence, patient but unreadable. You do not have to decide now, he said, turning toward the door. But if you do not, the media will keep chasing you, and they will not be kind. He left, and the bell above the door chimed once more. The room felt suddenly smaller, quieter. Elena sank onto a stool, staring at the folder. The smell of sugar and coffee hung heavy in the air. By evening, the headlines had only grown worse. Who is Alexander Reid's secret fiancé? Cinderella at the Belridge Ball. Her phone buzzed again, this time a text from her landlord. Rent overdue. Eviction next week. Elena closed her eyes. Every part of her screamed that it was madness, but desperation has a voice louder than reason. The next morning, when a black car pulled up outside her bakery, she stepped out with the signed contract in hand. Alexander opened the door for her without a word. His cologne was sharp, his posture impossibly controlled. You are sure about this? He asked quietly. Elena met his gaze. I am not sure about anything anymore, she said, but I need to survive. He nodded once, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. Then, Miss Carter, welcome to the arrangement. As the car door shut behind her, she looked out at the city, fading past the window. She had no idea that what began as a deal would soon become the one thing neither of them expected, something heartbreakingly real. The car rolled through the tall iron gates of the Reid estate, and Elena stared out the window in disbelief. The mansion looked more like a museum than a home. Massive marble columns, endless glass walls, and a fountain shaped like an angel frozen in motion. She tightened her grip on her purse, feeling painfully out of place. When the car stopped, a uniformed attendant opened the door for her. Welcome, Miss Carter, he said politely. She stepped out, her heels sinking slightly into the cobblestone path. Alexander was already waiting at the entrance, calm and composed as ever. Come inside, he said. You will need to meet a few people before the story becomes public. Inside, the house was silent except for the faint ticking of an antique clock. Everything gleamed silver, glass, marble. A woman in her 50s appeared from the hallway, her sharp eyes flicking from Alexander to Elena. This is her? She asked coldly. Yes, Alexander replied. Elena Carter, my fiancée. The woman did not smile. I am Mrs. Green, the house manager. I will see to your room. My room? Elena asked, startled. Alexander's tone remained calm but firm. You will stay here during the contract period. It will be easier for the press to believe the engagement if you are seen together. Elena followed Mrs. Green up a sweeping staircase lined with portraits of stern-looking men. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old money. The room she was given was larger than her entire apartment, with a balcony overlooking the city skyline. This is temporary, Mrs. Green said curtly before leaving. Elena stood in the middle of the room, her reflection caught in the massive mirror. She whispered to herself, What have I done? Is Wunster backed? A knock came at the door. Alexander stood there holding a folder. Our public schedule begins tomorrow, he said. Interviews, charity gala, and a dinner with the board. I have never done anything like that, she admitted. You will learn, he said simply. I will make sure of it. The next day was a blur. Stylists, assistants, and photographers flooded in. She was fitted for dresses, coached on posture, taught how to smile for cameras. "Do not cross your arms," one stylist said. "Tilt your head slightly when he speaks." By the afternoon, Elena barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her hair shimmered, her makeup flawless, her borrowed confidence carefully constructed. When Alexander entered the room, even he paused for a brief second before speaking. "You look convincing," he said, clearing his throat. "Thank you, I think," she replied nervously. That evening, they appeared together at a charity gala. The flashes of cameras were blinding, the air thick with perfume and power. Alexander guided her through the crowd with quiet assurance, his hand light on her back. At one point, a reporter asked, "Mr. Reid, what made you fall in love with Miss Carter?" Elena froze, unsure what to say. Alexander's lips curved in a faint smile. "She reminded me that sincerity still exists," he said smoothly, his eyes lingering on hers just a second too long. The crowd melted into soft laughter and applause, but Elena's pulse raced. For a moment, she almost believed him. Later that night, when they returned to the mansion, she slipped off her heels and sighed. "You are very good at pretending," she said quietly. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. "So are you," he said. "But remember, pretending is part of the deal." She nodded, though something inside her shifted. For the first time, she wondered if either of them truly knew where the pretending ended and the truth began. The following week moved faster than Elena could keep up with. Every morning started with a schedule printed in perfect order: meetings, fittings, rehearsals for interviews. Every evening ended with silence, the kind that filled the enormous house like an echo of something missing. Alexander remained distant but courteous. He spoke to her as though she were a business partner, never crossing the boundaries of the contract. Still, small moments began to slip through: the way he held a door open a second longer than necessary, or how his eyes softened when she laughed despite herself. One morning she walked into the breakfast room to find him already there, reading the newspaper. The sunlight spilled across the table, and his usual cold expression was replaced by something almost human. "You are up early," he said without looking up. "I could not sleep," she replied. "Too many cameras waiting outside." "They will get bored soon," Alexander said, folding the paper. "The world moves on quickly." "Maybe," she said quietly, "but people like me do not move on so easily." He looked at her then. Really looked. For a second, the CEO mask cracked. "You mean people who actually have something to lose?" She nodded. "Exactly." That night, they attended a dinner with the board of directors. The ballroom buzzed with polite conversation and false smiles. Alexander guided her through introductions, his hand steady on her back. When an older executive's wife leaned close and whispered, "She does not look like your usual type," Elena felt her stomach twist. Before she could react, Alexander's voice cut through the air, calm but sharp. "You are right," he said. "She is not my type. She is honest." The table went silent. The woman looked away, embarrassed. Elena's heart raced. She did not know if it was gratitude or something deeper stirring inside her. After dinner, she stepped out onto the balcony to catch her breath. The city lights stretched out below like constellations. Alexander joined her a moment later, his expression unreadable. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said softly. "I did not handle anything," she said. "You did." He leaned on the railing beside her. "It has been a long time since I had someone who would stand next to me without wanting something in return." Elena hesitated. "You think I do not want something?" He smiled faintly. "You want survival. That is different. Survival is honest." The silence that followed was gentle, filled with the sound of distant traffic and the hum of the night. "Why did you really do it?" she asked finally. "The whole pretend engagement. There must be another reason." He looked away, jaw tightening. "My father built this company from nothing. After he died, the board questioned my stability. They needed to see a man settled, in control. I gave them what they wanted." "A lie," she said quietly. "A survival tactic," he corrected. Their eyes met again, something fragile passing between them. For the first time, Alexander looked like a man, not a CEO, someone who carried too much weight on his shoulders and too many ghosts in his past. Later that night, as she returned to her room, Elena caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. The diamond ring on her finger glimmered faintly under the chandelier. It had been fake from the start, but as her heart raced, she could not ignore the truth forming inside her. Maybe this pretend marriage was becoming something dangerously real. A few days later, Elena found herself standing in front of a mirror again, but this time it was inside a luxury suite at the Belridge Grand. A charity gala was being held that night, and she was expected to attend as Alexander Reid's fiancée. The stylist pinned the last strand of her hair and stepped back. "Perfect," she said. "You look like someone who belongs in his world." Elena managed a polite smile, though her stomach churned with nerves. She had spent the last 2 weeks learning how to stand, walk, and speak like someone who belonged to the elite. But no amount of training could quiet the voice inside that reminded her she was still a baker from a small shop with overdue bills. When Alexander entered the room, dressed in a black tuxedo, everything seemed to still. His usual business tone softened for a moment. "You look radiant," he said quietly. "Radiant?" She gave a small laugh. "That is not a word I hear often." He smiled faintly. "Then you should hear it more." The ride to the gala was quiet. Flashbulbs greeted them the moment they stepped out of the car, cameras flashing like lightning. Elena's hand trembled until Alexander's fingers closed around hers. "Just breathe," he whispered. "They will only see what we let them see." One insaudible god with Markin. Inside the ballroom, golden chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. The city's most powerful people mingled under the sound of a live orchestra. Elena kept her chin high, repeating his words in her mind like a prayer. But the calm did not last long. A woman in a shimmering silver gown approached, her red lips curving into a smirk. "Alexander," she said smoothly, "you never told me your engagement was real." Elena recognized her instantly from the news. Victoria Hale, public relations executive, Alexander's former girlfriend, and one of the people who had once questioned his leadership. Alexander's posture stiffened. "Victoria," he said evenly, "this is not the time." "And it was placed in the A. Bongtal South on the Yakter." "Oh, but it is," Victoria replied sweetly, turning her gaze to Elena. "I just wanted to meet the woman who tamed the untamable Alexander Reid." Elena forced a smile. "There is not much to tame. He just needed someone who tells him when he is wrong." The people nearby laughed, and even Alexander's lips twitched as though fighting a smile. Victoria's expression faltered. "Charming," she said, retreating with a forced grin. After she left, Alexander leaned down and whispered, "You handled that perfectly." "I almost fainted," Elena whispered back. "Do I still get points for effort?" "More than points," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You just won the board's confidence. They needed to see that you could hold your own." Hours later, after the gala ended and the last guests had left, Elena stood on the hotel's rooftop terrace, looking out over the glowing city. Her feet ached, her heart raced, and her thoughts were tangled. Alexander joined her, loosening his tie. "You surprised me tonight," he said softly. "In a good way, I hope." He nodded. "You reminded me of something I forgot a long time ago. What it means to trust someone." Elena turned to face him, and for the first time, she saw something different in his eyes. An ache, a quiet loneliness that mirrored her own. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" she asked. "All the time," he answered. "But tonight, for a few hours, it almost felt real." Neither of them spoke after that. The city lights shimmered like stars below them, and the cool night air carried the faint hum of violins from the ballroom. Elena looked at the man beside her, the billionaire who had once been nothing but a stranger, and realized that something had shifted. The contract had started as a cage. Now it felt dangerously like a doorway. The night after the gala, the Reid mansion felt quieter than usual. The press had flooded every outlet with photographs of the couple. Elena's shy smile, Alexander's steady hand on her back. The world had seen the perfect image, but behind closed doors, silence filled the hallways. Elena stood on the balcony outside her room, the moonlight brushing over her bare shoulders. Her heart still replayed his words from the rooftop. Tonight, for a few hours, it almost felt real. She had not been able to stop thinking about that sentence. A soft knock broke her thoughts. Alexander stood in the doorway, his jacket undone, his expression unreadable. "You are still awake," he said quietly. "I could ask you the same," she replied. "Do billionaires not sleep?" He gave a faint smile. "Not the ones with too much on their minds." He stepped closer, his eyes reflecting the city lights below. You handled everything perfectly at the gala. You made them believe in us. It was just part of the deal, she said, though her voice trembled slightly. Maybe, he murmured, but it did not feel that way. The space between them grew smaller. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint rustle of the night breeze and the distant hum of the city. Elena's pulse thudded against her ribs. She took a small step back, trying to steady herself. You should get some rest, Mr. Reid. He hesitated, then nodded. Good night, Elena. When the door closed, she exhaled shakily. The line between contract and connection was beginning to blur, and she knew it. The next morning brought another kind of silence, one that carried weight. The tabloids had published a new headline: Alexander Reid's secret bride, the lie behind the billionaire. Someone had leaked their contract. The words fake fiancé were printed in bold across every major outlet. By the time Alexander arrived at the breakfast table, his phone was ringing non-stop. His assistant's voice came through the speaker, panicked. The board is demanding an emergency meeting. They think you used her for publicity. Elena's heart sank. Alexander, I swear I did not tell anyone. He looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. I know, he said slowly, but someone wanted this to happen. A day-wise. Who would do that? She asked. Someone who wants to see me fail, he said bitterly. Someone like Victoria. The meeting that afternoon was brutal. The board questioned his integrity, his leadership, his judgment. Cameras waited outside the building as reporters shouted questions about the fake engagement scandal. When Alexander walked out, the confident man she had known was gone. He looked tired, almost defeated. At home, Elena waited in the library, twisting the fake diamond ring around her finger. When he entered, she stood immediately. Alexander, I am so sorry. I never meant for any of this. He cut her off gently. It is not your fault. I made this choice. The self the sixer in a not biased and in suchast and self. But they are blaming you, she said. He shrugged, forcing a tired smile. I have been blamed before. It is part of the job. She took a hesitant step closer. What happens now? I will fix it, he said. But I might lose everything in the process. Her voice broke. And what about us? He looked at her then, and for the first time, the walls between them completely fell. That depends on whether there ever really was an us. The words hit harder than she expected. Without another word, she removed the ring and set it on the table between them. Then I suppose our contract is over. She walked past him, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Alexander did not stop her. When the door closed, he picked up the ring, staring at it for a long time. The sparkle caught the dim light of the chandelier, and for the first time in years, the man who had everything realized he had finally lost something that truly mattered. The following days passed in a blur of silence and headlines. The once celebrated engagement had turned into a public scandal. The media called her the fake bride, and Alexander was branded as a manipulative billionaire who staged his love life for power. Elena shut down her bakery for good. The little shop that once smelled of sugar and cinnamon now stood dark, with a handwritten sign taped to the window, closed indefinitely. She packed her remaining things into 2 small boxes and moved into a modest apartment on the edge of the city. Every night, she saw his face on television, Alexander Reid, the man who had offered her a deal and somehow stolen her heart. She tried to hate him for dragging her into his world, but all she could feel was a hollow ache. Across town, Alexander sat in his office, staring at the same news coverage. The board had suspended him temporarily, pending investigation. His once loyal investors were retreating, and even his closest advisors questioned his decisions. But none of it hurt as much as watching Elena walk out that night. For days, he refused interviews and declined meetings. Then one morning, he received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of Elena, standing outside her closed bakery, holding a box of leftover cupcakes she could not sell. On the back was a single line written in careful handwriting. Do not forget where you came from. He knew immediately who had sent it. Victoria. That afternoon, he confronted her at a high-end restaurant where she was meeting with another investor. Her smile was perfectly practiced when he approached. Alexander, she said, feigning surprise. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? You leaked the contract, he said, his voice steady but sharp. She tilted her head. Proof? He leaned forward. You always wanted my position. You almost had it, but now the board knows exactly what kind of snake they are dealing with. Her smile faltered for the first time. Be careful, Alexander. You are not untouchable anymore. Neither are you, he replied coldly, before walking away. That evening, Alexander sat alone in the quiet of his mansion. The lights felt too bright, the rooms too empty. He opened his laptop and typed a statement addressed to the media and his shareholders. His voice, steady and unfiltered, filled the recording. The rumors are true. Our engagement was an arrangement, one I take full responsibility for. But what began as a mistake taught me something about truth, humility, and the kind of leadership my father once believed in. I have wronged people, but I will make it right. He paused before the final line. His voice softened. And to the woman who reminded me that honesty still exists, I am sorry. The next morning, his public confession went viral. Some called it reckless, others called it brave. But for the first time, Alexander did not care. Meanwhile, in her small apartment, Elena watched the video on her phone. Tears blurred her vision as she heard his voice steady, remorseful, real. She could tell this was not part of any performance. The following day, an envelope arrived at her door. Inside was a folded piece of paper with a familiar signature at the bottom. It read, "Sweet Haven is yours again, fully paid, fully restored. You once saved me when you did not even know it. Let me return the favor." Attached was a single key. Elena pressed it against her chest, trembling. For the first time since everything fell apart, she felt something shift inside her hope. At the same moment, across the city, Alexander stood at his office window, looking out at the skyline that had once defined him. The company could replace him, the world could judge him, but he finally understood what it meant to lose something truly priceless. And somewhere deep down, he knew this was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of redemption. The following weekend, a warm breeze swept through the city as the sun dipped low behind the skyline. Elena stood in front of her old bakery, Sweet Haven, the key trembling in her hand. The windows had been cleaned, the lights fixed, and the sign freshly repainted. Someone had even left fresh flowers by the door. It looked exactly as it did before everything fell apart, except now, it was hers again. She unlocked the door slowly. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon still lingered in the air. On the counter sat an envelope sealed with gold wax. Inside was a simple note written in Alexander's neat handwriting. Open tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring your favorite cupcakes. She stared at the note, her heart pounding. After everything that had happened, the lies, the scandal, the heartbreak, why would she go? But something inside her whispered that she needed to see him. Not for closure, but for truth. The next morning, Elena woke before dawn. She baked a batch of her signature caramel cupcakes, packed them carefully in a white box, and walked to the address on the card. It led her to a quiet corner of the city, the rooftop garden of the Belridge Hotel, where it had all begun. When she stepped out of the elevator, the soft rustle of wind and the scent of jasmine filled the air. A long table had been set under twinkling string lights, but no one else was there, just Alexander, standing near the edge, looking out at the horizon. He turned when he heard her footsteps. His expression held no arrogance, no pretense, only sincerity. "You came," he said softly. "I almost did not," she admitted. "After everything, I was not sure if I should." "I would not have blamed you," he said, "but I needed to see you." He gestured to the table. On it sat a small velvet box, closed but unmistakable. Her breath caught. "Alexander, what is this?" He took a deep breath. "An apology. And something more." He stepped closer, his voice steady. "I built my life on contracts and control, but you showed me something I had forgotten: kindness without condition. When the world fell apart, you did not betray me. You just walked away with your dignity. I never deserved that grace, but I want to earn it now." She blinked, speechless. He opened the box. Inside was the same ring she had once left on the table the night she walked out. But this time, the diamond was replaced with a small caramel-colored stone, the same shade as her cupcakes. "I do not want a deal," he said quietly. "No more contracts, no more pretending. I want something real. I want you. Is there purses as a buy?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Alexander, you do not have to do this. You have already given me back my bakery, my life." He shook his head. "That was not a gift. That was a correction. This He took her hand gently. This is what I choose. She looked down at their hands, her pulse racing. You really think we can start over? After everything? He smiled faintly. No, I think we can start honestly. That is better. For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The wind brushed against her hair, and somewhere below, the city kept moving, unaware that two people were rewriting the ending of their own story. Elena nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then yes, she whispered. Let us start over. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand trembling slightly. This time, he said, his voice breaking just a little. No contracts, just love. The sun rose behind them, painting the sky gold. For the first time, the moment did not feel like an act. It felt real, completely, beautifully real. The morning sun spread a soft golden glow across the rooftop garden. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as Alexander held Elena's hand. The city below moved with its usual rhythm, but up here, everything felt quiet and sacred. He had just slipped the caramel-colored ring onto her finger, the same finger that once wore the fake one. Now, it felt different. It felt alive. Elena looked down at the ring, her voice barely a whisper. It is beautiful. Alexander smiled gently. It is not perfect, but neither are we. That is what makes it real. For the first time since their chaotic beginning, she let out a genuine laugh. You have a strange way of proposing, Alexander Reid. You make it sound like a business pitch. He grinned, shaking his head. Then let me say it properly. He took both of her hands in his. Elena Carter, you changed my life in ways I never expected. You walked into my world by accident and somehow made it worth living again. Will you marry me, not as part of a deal, not as a favor, but because you believe we can build something true? Her throat tightened. I already do. He slipped the ring fully into place, and she leaned into his embrace. For a long time they stood there, the city's heartbeat pulsing softly below them. The same skyline that had once represented pressure and power now felt like the backdrop of freedom. Weeks passed, and word of their reconciliation spread quietly through the media. This time there were no flashy headlines or paparazzi chaos. Instead, a short article appeared in a business magazine. Alexander Reid returns to lead with a new vision, kindness as the core of leadership. This nuding, soon you matter. At Sweet Haven, business flourished again. Customers filled the tiny bakery every morning, drawn by the warmth and laughter that had returned to the little corner of the city. Elena kept the caramel ring on her finger as she worked, its soft gleam catching the morning light. On the wall near the counter hung a photograph, the two of them at the rooftop, smiling as if the world had finally given them peace. One afternoon, Alexander walked in wearing a simple gray suit, holding a bouquet of white lilies. The regular customers smiled knowingly. You know, Elena said teasingly, if you keep showing up like this, people will think the billionaire really loves the baker. He laughed. Let them think it. For once the rumors would be true. He helped her close the shop early, and together they walked hand in hand through the park across the street. The city air was warm, the sky streaked with orange and pink. Do you ever think about that first night? She asked. When you told me to pretend I was your bride? Every day, he said softly. It was the worst idea I ever had, and the best accident of my life. Elena smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. Then maybe fate knew what it was doing after all. He stopped walking and turned toward her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. No more pretending, he said. From now on, everything we build, our work, our life, our love will be real. She nodded, her eyes shining. Real, she repeated. As they kissed, the streetlights flickered on, casting a warm glow around them. The city that had once judged them now faded into a soft hum behind the sound of their laughter. In the window of Sweet Haven, the sign now read, closed for a private event. Inside, candles flickered on every table, and a small group of close friends gathered quietly. There was no media, no contracts, no performance, only vows whispered between two people who had learned that love built on truth is stronger than any empire built on power. And when the ceremony ended, Elena placed her hand over his heart and smiled. You once asked me to pretend to be your bride, she said. Now you will never have to ask again. He kissed her forehead and whispered, Welcome home, Mrs. Reid. And this time, it was not part of a deal. It was forever.